Okay, guys. Oh, that's really scenic and serene. Sorry, director. Serene means peaceful and like nice. Okay? Yeah, good. Write that down. So this last section, guys, last question, whatever, pertains to the following. If I was, again, to hedge my best and guess, there will probably be a question which discusses what affects the break-even point. In other words, what, if it occurred, would make our break-even point increase? What, if it occurred, would make our break-even point decrease? So on and so forth. So the example I always want you guys to go back in your heads to is what? The tutoring zone example, okay? Think about tutoring zone review that you went to. We have fixed costs. What are fixed costs? Good. The room. The room that we're in is a fixed cost. The room we have to rent, you say, look, they charge us about $1,500 for that room, no matter how many people show up, okay? So that's important, okay? Thing number two, what is our variable costs? Good. Think about the packets of material, okay? The packets, if more students show up, we have to make more packets. If less students show up, we have to make less packets, so on and so forth. And of course, the selling price is just truly the price of the review itself, okay? And so when I ask a question that is, what causes the break-even point to increase, what I'm really asking is, what if it occurred would require more students to show up for us to break even? Similarly, if the break-even point were to decrease, that's essentially asking, what, if it occurred, would make it such that the number of students required to break even would go down? Does that make sense? So if we, let's just logically, guys, let's say we increase the selling price. Increase the selling price, okay? Does the break-even point increase or decrease? Good, it decreases, right? Because if we charge like $1,000 a student, we're not going to take many students for us to break even. Does that make sense, right? So again, the break-even point will decrease because we require fewer students, right, to break even. Similar to that, if the variable cost per unit goes up, right, does the break-even point increase or decrease? You go, let's think. The packets cost more for us to make, so they don't cost like $5, they cost like $20, okay? Man, oh man. So if they cost $20 for us, tutoring zone, to make, we need a lot more students to show up before we can eventually break even. Does that make sense? So going back to that same kind of logic, here's a good, just like, again, this is a cross-section. This isn't like the exact question which will be on the exam, but rather it's just to give you an idea of what type of thing you should expect. And so long as you think about it the way that I just said, you'll always be okay. So which of the following would cause the break-even point to what, guys? Decrease, okay? To decrease, all right? Now, okay, remember, that's saying which of these, if it happened, would make it to where we would then need fewer students to show up for us to break even, okay? If this happened, we really would need a whole heck of a lot of students to show up for us to break even. Well, let's see. Number one, an increase in the contribution margin per unit. Oh, everybody hates these. Let's go over this real fast, okay? We know that if you take the selling price, okay, the selling price can be broken into two pieces. We have contribution margin and variable cost, okay? If we have an increase in the contribution margin, it may be helpful to think about it this way. An increase in the contribution margin is a crafty way of just saying what makes the variable cost per unit go down, right? In other words, if the contribution margin per unit increases, that's the same essentially thing as saying the variable cost per unit decreases. Okay, so now let me think. If the variable cost per unit decreases, in other words, it doesn't cost a whole heck of a lot to make a packet. It doesn't cost a whole heck of a lot to make a packet. Do we need more or less students to show up to break even? Yeah, the answer is we'll need fewer. One more time. If the packets for tutorings, they don't cost us much at all, man. They cost us like $1 to make. It's not a really big cost on our end, okay? So it turns out we have a lot more wiggle room in the amount of money we get to play with. In other words, we don't need as many students to show up, right, in order to break even. So number one is true, okay? If we increase the contribution margin per unit, right, or in essence we decrease the variable cost per unit, we won't need quite as many students to show up in order for us to break even. Okay, always think about it logically. Number two, a decrease in total fixed costs. So again, it turns out that TC doesn't charge us $1,500 for the room. They charge us $100. Will we need more or less students to break even? I'll say it one more time. If TCC charges us $100 for the room, will we need more or less students to break even? The answer is good. We will need less. Okay, we don't need as many students to show up because we don't have it to cover such a huge cost anymore. So that'll work as well. Third, an increase in total costs, fixed and variable. So let's just say our total costs go through the roof. This is kind of tricky because it's not in the previous page, but that's okay. You can intuit what the answer is. If the total costs, either fixed or variable, go up, what happens? Yeah, we need more students to break even. Make sense? So that would not cause a decrease in the break-even point. Okay, again, if all of our costs go through the roof, then no, we wouldn't actually need less students. We would actually need more students to break even. So again, the answer to this one is 1 and 2 only. Okay? So again, I just want to make sure you guys overall understand the basic premise of the things you have to know for the exam, right? And make sure you guys have this shit down like it's nobody's business. All right? So be good. Take it easy. Nice scenic background. Isn't that nice? Nice.